Good morning. So glad to have another day, to be able to gather, to worship together, to enjoy our music. You can see some of the lineup already. Some families among us. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. We here are open to you in finding your way, your path in religion, spirituality, with one another. We support one another in our spiritual growth. And we help one another to make this world a better, more fair place. Welcome. I have a few announcements to share with all of us here. Let's see. Today is the last time you can sign up on the sign-up sheet for Meals at Power Up. And you can find the sign-up sheet in the counter in the foyer. Thank you for your support. And we don't need a representative as soon as possible, but we do need you to eat. There we go. And I know a whole bunch of folks participated in the tents and tarps, the TNT drive, to bring in all sorts of things that will help the homeless people. And we note that while our drive here is done, every single tent and tarp that we donated to Sharing House went flying out the door. So if you know your way to Sharing House, and if you don't, that's okay. You go out our front door, you take an immediate turn just past the Cardinal, and you go up that street, and then you'll see Sharing House 2 blocks up. They will still take tarps and tents, even though we aren't. So please think about doing that. Right after this service, I want to announce that I am doing a Soul Matters discussion. For those of you unfamiliar with the Soul Matters packets, that is every month we have a worship theme that also is a at-home things that you can do to go deeper into the subject. This month is Heritage, the gift of heritage. And for those of you who would like, just show up in the large classroom after the children's religious exploration is over, so you have time to get coffee. And then we'll go into the large classroom and have a discussion. I know at least one person has said that they're going to show up. And if it's a one-on-one conversation, that's fine, but you're all invited. This Thursday at 3 o'clock, there is a prayer service in the community at the Lutheran Church, a prayer service for all that's going on in the Middle East, interfaith prayer service. So if you want to go to Good Shepherd Lutheran Church on 3 o'clock to participate in that, that's a nice way for the community to recognize what's going on in the world in a prayerful way. Then the next day, we have a new member orientation class. Friday at 10 a.m., we're going to do a makeup session for a couple of folks who couldn't do our summer session. And we've added in a couple of more who said, yeah, we could do Friday morning. So from 10 to noon, plus if you bring your lunch, we could go a little bit longer with you. We'll be here, and Susan Slocum and I and others will help tell all about UUTC and everything you need to know in 2 hours. Yeah, it's pretty good. So anybody's welcome. Please do let me know or Susan Slocum know, so that we can be ready for you and have the right number of handouts. There are many more things going on in this community and in this congregation. I have not listed all of them. You'll need to read more in your weekly emails or the newsletter to find out more of what's going on. I'm so glad that we are an active, busy, engaged congregation. Thank you. for our candles this morning, for those of you who are new among us, we light candles when we come in to this service to mark something that's special, a special joy or a deep sorrow. And this morning we have 2 candles going already from people who emailed or texted and asked for them since they would not be here. One is also related to these flowers. We have the flowers and a candle from Nanette Crocker and Thomas V. Noland in loving memory of their aunt, Jill Anita Roberts. And there's already a candle glowing for Don and Marcia Odell. This week, after much suffering, they put down their dog Bo, the companion, loved 4-legged companion. Are there other joys or sorrows? Linda. It is so good to see you, Linda. Thank you for being here. Others? We're going to start in the back and then move forward. Lem.
Tomorrow is a signal day for us, Marilyn and me. 69 years. I am still trying to figure out how she puts up with me.
All right. Congratulations, Lem and Marilyn this week, 69 years. Good. Jim.
Yes, our niece, Martha, up in Michigan, is very close to death. She's been put into home hospice, and I think death could come at any time. She's 49. Wow.
So, Jim, our hearts go out to you and your family, your niece, Martha, who's close to death, only 49 years old. Elena.
I want to share a joy. We're very excited. Our son Eric is coming to visit on Friday from San Diego, and he went to Brevard College in 2011 and has not been back since. So we're really excited to see him and reintroduce him to his old college friends.
Great. So your son is visiting from California, and this is his first time back since graduating from Brevard College. Since coming to Brevard College. Yeah, Cadence. Joy that Cadence's mom had a birthday. Congratulations. I'll make sure I put the age in the newsletter. Elena again.
Just wanted to add, our son did graduate from college and get his master's.
Proud mom making the clarification there. All right. Educational achievement. That's wonderful. Yeah. For those of you who aren't with us all the time, you can tell we are a joyful group. Let us light a candle for all those things not yet shared in the hearts of those who've come in, or perhaps those who are at home and not here to share them. To remember when we meet and greet at coffee hour or any time that we reach out and learn more from one another. This is how we weave the fabric of community. In honor of the recognition of our humanity with one another, the divinity within, and the dignity of all, I invite you to turn and greet your neighbor.
Good morning. I'm Joanna Bliss, and I am the worship associate today, and I seem to have a frog in my throat. Our opening words are from Philip Hewitt's From the Fragmented World, and Reverend Bob and I will read them alternating. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather in search of wholeness.
By many cares and preoccupations, by diverse and selfish aims, are we separated from one another and divided within ourselves.
Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all.
We cherish our oneness with those around us and the countless generations that have gone before us.
We would hold fast to all of good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the false.
We would escape from bondage to the ideas of our own day and from the delusions of our own fancy.
Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day without hatred, violence, and injustice.
Let us nurture the growth in our own lives of the love that has shone in the lives of the greatest of our human kin, the rays of whose lamps still illumine our way.
In this spirit we gather. In this spirit we pray.
We invite you to rise as you are willing and able to sing together hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. The words will be on the screen.
The words for lighting our chalice this morning come from Robin F. Gray. We will read them in unison. Day breaks on our gratitude for family and friends, for the freedom to find our own truth, for the company of those who gather here, and the promises we offer one another. Let the light of day bring the grace of faith into our lives.
How many of you know what a golf ball is? You've seen golf balls. All right. I'm going to tell you a story. Story when I was young, and I'm going to get some wisdom out of it. Because in Unitarian Universalism, your minister can preach on golf balls. All right. So here it is. My grandmother, part of the year, would drive down to Florida in the wintertime and live where it was warm. And I hear her mom had done the same thing. And then she would drive back in the hot months and go all the way up to Maine, where it was always very cool, even in the midst of August. My family and I didn't live in Maine, and we didn't live in Florida, and we didn't much drive anywhere. But in the summertime, we would drive up to Maine, and we would spend time in a cabin on a lake and get to visit my grandmother and other relatives up there. Now, my grandmother had a really special apartment. Now, what made it special wasn't so much its size or its view or anything like that. You see, my grandmother's apartment was special because it was directly across the street from a golf course. And from time to time, my grandmother would hear golf balls hitting her apartment, or coming through the window, or landing at the foot of her stairs. Now, I think most people would get very annoyed at having golf balls coming through their windows. But my grandmother taught me something about life. My grandmother was appreciative of many things in life and the joy of being able to live life and have her family nearby and a place to live and the beautiful days. Because you see, almost no one hit golf balls into her window on miserable days. Because it turns out golfers almost never go out when it's a bad day. So a golf ball through your window is a signal of how wonderful and blessed you are for the day. Years later, when my grandmother died and we had a memorial service, I went to the memorial service with a golf ball in my pocket. There were lots of things to remember my grandmother by, and I talked about those. But I still have a golf ball from what had been her tray of collected golf balls. And I still have the lesson that sometimes you know it's a good day when a golf ball crashes through your window. And that really, the way in which you look upon things is more important. She never took it as an insult. She always took it as a signal of something good. And I've decided that's part of my heritage. And I'm going to do that too. So there you go. There's our lesson for this morning. And it looks like, Rowan, you're going to carry the candle out with everyone. Let's sing as they go out. Yeah, that golf ball's in a box someplace. I know we moved it from Pennsylvania. I know I've got it someplace. Chrissy's nodding her head like, yeah. Mhm. We have many treasures. Things that help remind us of good times, things that help remind us of how we made it through tough times. We have treasures in money too. It's said that you don't get into heaven unless you give up all your treasure. I'm not asking to do your memorial service right now. But if you have a little bit, just a little bit, that you might give for the good of this congregation or for what you voted on as our special nonprofit collection this month, Sharing House, put the Sharing House donation into an envelope and put the loose cash and checks into the plate or baskets, and that will help us as a congregation remain with our strength and be able to transmit our heritage to our children and others who come to us. We will now gratefully receive the morning offering. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Gypsy. All that is given in love, we receive with great joy, and we say, thank you. Let's turn our hearts to that meditative place, that place that resonates with that iron string within, the inner light, the connection with the Spirit, with the divine, in whatever names you use for this ritual. May you center yourselves as I bring time of prayer and meditation. Spirit of love and life, we who are gathered here, amidst the glow of these candles, have our hearts reach out to those who are grieving the loss of loved ones in their lives. Two-legged, four-legged, our companions along the journey, those who share time with us and connection. This morning our hearts go out in particular to the Odells and the loss of their four-legged companion, Bo. We also come with memories of those who have gone before, family members, ancestors to us, teachers along the way, people who have still a place in our hearts. And this morning that includes Jill Anita Roberts. We rejoice that there are those in our midst who have reached milestones in birthdays, in anniversaries. We rejoice with the Renners. We rejoice with Lem and Marilyn, and with those who didn't admit, but that they have circled round the sun one more time. We rejoice with those who have had visits or have just returned from visits, knowing that our connections to family and the ways in which we continue our bonds make a great deal of impact to our hearts and our lives. For Elena and Chuck, in particular this morning, thinking of their son visiting from California. We rejoice in those who have come back to us, whom we have missed for some time. Linda and Richard back among us, and we rejoice. And our hearts reach out to those who are watching as family members are edging ever closer to death, whose lives we hope will have comfort in the final days, and all the mixed feelings, for the young or old, on their passing. In particular, this morning, our prayers go out to the Null family for their niece, Martha, who, at only 49, is close to death. These and the prayers of our hearts and the thoughts of our minds we hold now in the silence. In the names of all those known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind, we say, Amen. Blessed be.
I'm going to say a few words here in a minute. How many of y'all ever been to a sacred harp singing? Not many. One of the things, it's interesting that the theme for this month is heritage. It's a different kind of heritage from what we're going to do now, but we're going to sing a song from the shape note tradition. One of the hymnal that I grew up with in Atlanta is called still the Sacred Harp hymnal. There's a different one around here. The Sacred Harp hymnal is one of those that has different shapes for each note in the scale. Actually, in the Sacred Harp hymnal, there are only 4 different shapes: fa, sol, la, mi, fa, up the scale. Around here, they use a different hymnal which has seven different shapes. Just imagine that. The tradition began with, among others, William Billings, a famous American conductor in the 18th century, and has made its way south to Georgia, to North Carolina, South Carolina, where it's carried on in congregations which typically don't involve musical instruments of any kind. It's an a cappella type of singing, and that's what we're going to try to do today. I sang with a bunch in Atlanta. They had big singings in the spring in the old Decatur courthouse and right outside of Atlanta. And they'd have a singing in the morning, and they'd have lunch on the grounds, and have another singing in the afternoon. And one of the guys said, to really be able to sing Sacred Harp music the way it's supposed to be sung is you have to have another voice on the other side of horse. Think about that. We're not going to do it that way this morning. The name of the piece, of the tune that we're going to sing, is Jordan. And I want to share the words with you just in case you're not listening carefully to when we sing them in a minute. The first verse is from the Bible. Of course, it talks about standing at the River Jordan, that's the name of the tune, and looking across to the Promised Land. There is a land of pure delight where saints immortal reign, where saints immortal reign. And finite day excludes the night, and pleasures banish pain. The words are from Isaac Watts, who wrote them in the first decade of the 18th century, somewhere around 1705. Sweet fields beyond the swelling flood is the Jordan River, stand dressed in living green. So to the Jews old Canaan stood, the promised land, while Jordan rolled between. Then the second verse pulls it down to our time. Oh, could we make our doubts remove, those gloomy doubts that rise? And we're hoping that the basses will carry that note that rise. It's supposed to carry it over when the rest of us are taking a little break, but we'll see how that goes this morning. And we see the Canaan that we love with unbeclouded eyes. Could we but climb where Moses stood and view the landscape o'er, nor Jordan's stream, nor death's cold flood could frighten us from the shore.
Saints
The reading I have to share is from Philip Hewitt. It's in the hymn book. It's number 440, but you don't have to look it up. I'll read it all to you just fine. It's called From the Fragmented World. It's been slightly adapted for inclusivity words. No, we already did this one. We did this one. I'm going to do a different one. Here we go. Saint-Exupéry wrote, "In a house which becomes a home, one hands down and another takes up the heritage of mind and heart, laughter and tears, musings and deeds. Love, like a carefully loaded ship, crosses the gulf between generations. Therefore, we do not neglect the ceremonies of our passage. When we are wed, when we die, when we're blessed with a child, when we depart and when we return, when we plant and then when we harvest. Let us bring up our children. It is not the place of some official to hand to them their heritage. If others impart to our children our knowledge and ideals, they will lose all of us that is wordless and full of wonder. Let us build memories in our children, lest they drag out joyless lives, lest they allow treasures to be lost because they have not been given the keys. We live not by things, but by the meaning of things. It is needful to transmit the passwords from generation to generation." Well, you already heard the good part about golf balls. If you don't get anything else out of this sermon today, you will have gotten quite a treasure. The golf ball story. Now, our packets every month from Soul Matters have us dig into ways in which we can each individually find a connection to heritage, to history, to make something of our lives upon the lessons that we have. Yet Jim's holding up his packet. He brought his packet and extras for us. Those of you who aren't on the list can sign up. We'll get you on the list. But this idea that we can really wrestle with the ideas of heritage, we've already had 2 sermons on this. We had something of our history. I preached about our history. Our obnoxious heritage. It's lovely. And then I preached a little bit about heritage and understanding last week and recognizing that we're on the lands of the Cherokee and the ways in which Native American images and stories may have been exploited, even as we are in sympathy with the idea of the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. This week, I want to focus on family. I want to focus on what we have as a history and genealogy. Now, I didn't mention that Aaron Lausch is about to start a genealogy group here. You may have seen that in the update. I said, wow, this would be great. And I think I'm going to be able to show up for any sessions. I'm looking forward to it. We are, in part, our genes. We are what has been imparted to us from our ancestors. I read in the stories that there are people who have a lot of Neanderthal blood in them, and they were more susceptible to COVID. And I pulled out my mask again because I know I have Neanderthal in me. My mom, who died from COVID, had twice as much that I had according to our genetic tests. Our strengths and our weaknesses come sometimes directly from what we inherit, but we also know about epigenetics, the genes that are activated or deactivated in the womb, in our childhood, things that bring to us ways of surviving in the world. And it's interesting, the theories out there in epigenetics saying that if your parents were under stress at the time you were in gestation, there are certain genes that may be activated or deactivated. I mean, it's almost as if you think about how long and dumb humans have to be raised up before they're mature, sometimes to age 70. But there's something in genetics that tries to turn on certain things that will help us cope with the world we're being born into, it seems. And so, much as birds and fish and animals out there seem to be a lot better footing straight out of birth to make it in the world, they know to run away from danger, they know to go towards food, we, as human beings, apparently have some programming too. My heart goes out to those in this world, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in the places of drive-by shootings, the places in our world in which parents are under great deals of stress, and it is being transmitted down generation to generation. A quote that I read from the author of the packets that we read said that heritage isn't our history. Heritage is what we choose from our history to make our future, to carry into our future. Sometimes when we are born into circumstance or genetics that make it tough for us to cope with the world that may be not exactly what we would have been born into at that moment, maybe we have to relearn. We have to learn from others. We have to learn lessons from people about love, about safety, about making it in the world. Our families are really important to us because they are oftentimes the ones who help raise us into knowing this world. An older sibling, a younger sibling, a cousin, an uncle, a parent, a grandparent, all of them transmit to us something. Did you have a parent or grandparent who left you an inheritance of saved bits of string? Something along those lines, from making it through the Great Depression, making it with less? I inherited from my dad a sense of keeping track of the gas mileage of my car. And when we were clearing out the house for the final time, and I came across a miniature booklet that he would have kept in the glove box of his Volkswagen Beetle, marking up to almost 50 miles per gallon for that last tank full that he did, I kept it because I do the same thing. I write on each receipt what the mileage was and look at the miles since the last one and all of that. Now, what use of that is this in this world? The dashboard tries to give me an estimate of the miles per gallon. The onboard computer tells me whether the engine's not running right or not and puts this little orange wrench up if something's wrong. I do it because my father did it. I don't think my children will do it. They didn't, take it on. That's what you do. But they learned to drive with their hands at 9 and 3 instead of 10 and 2. They learned new things from others, useful things. I don't know what useless thing I have taught them, and my dad always said that you know whether you did well with your children once they're 30 and you see how they're doing. Mine haven't quite reached that age yet. Who knows whether we did right or not. But I know this. Families are all different. What did you do in your family? What did you learn in your family? What were the recipes you wanted and kept? Was it Grandma's cookies? Was it Dad's baking? What was it that you have learned of how to manage money? Or not? It's the traditions we decide to carry on or not. Nearly every person going through adolescence has a way of pushing back against parents, deciding they are not going to be their parents, and yet the progressive insurance ads are telling us that we are going to act just like our parents. They make it funny, but there are some things that we do. Like I said, we're going to be so different. Are we surprised when our children push back and don't want to be us? It's interesting to me that in Matthew 19, Jesus gives a person who's asking an answer about which commandments do I need to follow in order to get to heaven. Now, I've mentioned this one before. And Jesus leaves out the one about honoring your parents. Yeah, you shouldn't kill. I think adultery, you shouldn't do that. But honoring your mother and your father, that's not essential for getting into heaven. And I think for some people that's liberating. To understand that somewhere in one of the world's religions, there's an exception out there. You do not have to. And sometimes that's what we need too. Because remember I said the quote that sometimes we inherit history, but that doesn't mean that becomes our heritage. We can change. We can decide something different. It's good. Maybe we decide to go into this world a little more kind than what we experienced. Maybe we decide to go into this world by taking a breath before reacting in anger. Maybe we go into this world with the idea that our resources aren't here to squander for a moment's pleasure. Maybe we go into this world understanding that we pay it forward and make somebody else's life some random act of kindness for someone else in a world that wasn't really teaching us that it could be so kind at home. Maybe we choose something and make it into our story. I may have shared with you in small group or in this place a story about my grandmother. My grandmother ended up in poverty when her father died just 2 months before her high school graduation. My grandmother was very smart, and it worked very hard for her grades. And I think I heard the story that she was going to be valedictorian or salutatorian of her class, and they decided she wouldn't get it because it wouldn't do her any good since she wouldn't be going on to college, so they gave it to a boy instead. I don't know if that was true or not, but it was one of those things where I think my grandmother knew some unfairness in her life. And so straight out of high school, she needed to be earning money fast to help support her younger sister, her mother, at home. She worked as a secretary. Later in life, as she was entering society, she had married an immigrant who became a doctor, and she was trying to mix and mingle in the coastal Connecticut upper class. She was joining the Daughters of the American Revolution. That had some cachet. She could trace herself all the way back to the 1640s in this country. And then Marian Anderson was denied the chance to sing at the Daughters of the American Revolutionary Hall in Washington, D.C., and instead held her concert as an African American on the steps of the Lincoln Monument. Now, I don't know that my grandmother was particularly anti-racist, but she definitely felt that was not fair. And by the time I was born, she was no longer a member of the DAR. It did not matter. And by the time I was a young person aware of the world, she got a new neighbor. New neighbor moved in next door from another state. I won't name the state. Sometimes they get trashed. But they moved to Connecticut, and they wanted to know what was acceptable in this southern Connecticut town. And so they asked their new neighbor, my grandmother, do you think it would cause a stir if we put our lawn ornament out front? Their lawn ornament that they'd brought from where they lived before was a jockey in ragged clothes and painted up in very stereotypical ways, holding a lantern. My grandmother said, no, that would not be accepted here, in her genteel way. And so they hid it in their backyard instead. They left out the previous owner's lawn jockey, a English jockey with a red coat on. My dad said that she wasn't the exemplar of not being prejudiced, but I decide in my history that I will take those stories and make that part of my heritage, and the heritage that I told my children, that we can make a difference in the world, and we can move on from where we were and what we used to think was important, and now say this is important, acceptance of others. I don't know. You got other stories, I'm sure. I want to hear them in the discussion in the classroom after we get some coffee and conversation. The reality is, no two families are alike. No ways in which we see the world are exactly alike. A workshop I went to, the General Assembly this year, had Marisol Caballero on the panel. And Marisol wrote a whole article back in 2016 about her family, about how we have in-laws and second cousins and in the English language, but from her Latinx background in Spanish, they had other words that technically means a co-father and a co-mother, comadre and compadre. And the idea that your in-laws' cousins were in fact your cousins. Culturally, Each of us comes from a different background. Each of us understands family differently. Each of us walks in life dressed up in new and different ways. Our heritage is what we decide we will embrace and be open to guide us in the future. So yeah, go ahead and carry a golf ball in your pocket when you need it to recognize that it is a sunny day outside. Yeah, go ahead. Unplug the toaster if that's what you were taught. Scribble down your gas mileage. But also look at everything in new ways, that you might teach yourself and others how to survive in the world that is now all around us, instead of the worlds that used to be. Blessings on all of you from whatever family backgrounds you come from. Blessings on all of you as you decide your heritage that's worthwhile for your future. Thank you for listening. I invite you to rise and sing as you're willing and able. Hymn number 407, written by a group that was often excluded. We're going to sit at the welcome table. Sit at the welcome table. We're gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. All kinds of people around that table. All kinds of people around that table one of these days. Hallelujah. All kinds of people around that table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. No fancy style at the welcome table. No fancy style at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. Oh, fancy style at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. As this light goes out, may I give to you the hope of every blessing in your life. To let go of your past, what you do not want is your heritage. To embrace those things that will help you move forward. Though this light is gone, know that the light of this place is here to help guide you through our principles and our purposes, through this adopted family, that you may find your way in this world and helpfully guide others as well. Blessings on all of you. Amen.